Environmental impact assessment. So in this portion, we'll be studying more about EIA, its history, and also the various elements of EIA. Okay. Now, what is EIA? Environmental impact assessment. And here is a definition for EIA. It is a process of identifying, predicting, evaluating, and mitigating the biophysical, social, and other relevant effects of proposed projects and physical activities prior to major decisions and commitments being made. That is nothing but it is the assessment of the environmental consequence of a particular plan or a policy or a program or an actual project before deciding whether to move forward with the project or the proposed action or not. Okay. Now, to make it more clear, few questions are provided. So EIA becomes a cyclic process when we ask again and again these questions until the decision makers should come out with more workable solutions. Okay, so we'll see the questions. What will happen as a result of the project? So when a project comes up, what will happen because of that project? Now, what will be the extent of the changes? So if that particular project is making some changes in the environment, what is the extent of that? Whether it is a good impact or a bad impact or bad change to the environment. Do the changes really matter? So whether it is a positive or a negative impact, or whether the changes made by the project on the environment, will it really matter? What can be done about them? So if it is a negative impact, what can be done in order to mitigate it or to solve it? Now, finally, the decision makers be informed of what need to be done exactly to make the project a successful one. Now, coming to the purpose or the need of EIA. So the first point is, when a new project starts in an area, it will disturb the environmental equilibrium, so that EIA is necessary to know whether the project should be started or not. So whenever a new project comes up, we have to check whether the environmental equilibrium will be balanced or not. So for that, EIA should be definitely carried out. Then to maintain the quality of environment. So if there are many negative impacts because of the project, that quality of the environment should be maintained, and for that EIA should be done. EIA also suggests remedial measures for the pollution caused by the project. Thereby, we can implement pollution control methods. So, in any case, if there is any remedial measures to solve some kinds of problems like pollution, we can implement certain methods in order to prevent that impact. Okay. Now, the opinion of public, that's the most important thing. The opinion of public is considered for conducting an EIA, so that the decision made will be more effective and also environment friendly. Now, before moving to the elements, we have to also know the history of EIA, the evolution of EIA worldwide, and also history of EIA in India. So this tabular column shows the different acts and laws passed in different countries, and the years are also given. Okay, so you have to just go through it. Now, the history of EIA in India is also given. So it started from 1976 to 1977, and during that time, Planning Commission asked Department of Science and Technology to examine river valley projects from an environmental angle. So the following years, what are the steps we have taken to protect the environment while setting up new projects? Okay. Now, coming to the most important part, that is the elements of EIA. So the environmental impact assessment represents a systematic process that examines the environmental consequence of the development actions in advance. So the EIA procedure involves a number of steps, some of which are listed in this tabular column. So you have to study this tabular column for the exam. While writing the elements of EIA, you have to first draw this flow chart and then explain the different steps involved in an EIA process. So now let's see one by one. Now, these are the elements of EIA. there are nearly 15 steps. So we'll see one by one. So the first step is project screening. So this involves the application of EIA to those projects that may have significant environmental impacts. So we can categorize the projects and a final decision is made whether a full EIA, that is the process of environmental impact assessment, should be carried out or not. Okay. So the second step is scoping. So this step identifies the key or the significant environmental issues from among a number of possible impacts of a project. Okay, and it also identifies all the available alternatives we have. Now the third step is consideration of alternatives. So now we have a number of alternatives in the previous step in scoping, and this step, that is the consideration of alternative, ensures whether the proponent has considered these alternatives. Proponent is those who present the project. Okay, so it may be changing the location of the project, or you can even change the scale of the project or layout of it so that the impacts can be minimized. Now the fourth step is the description of the project or the development action. This is actually to clarify the clarify the purpose of the project and understand its various characteristics, the different stages of the project or the development, and location of the project and the process involved in it. And fifth step is description of the environmental baseline. This step is to understand the present and the future state of the environment, that is the state of environment in the absence of the project, and the future changes in environment due to the human activities. Now next is identification of key impacts. This step ensures all the environmental impacts can be either adverse or beneficial impacts, that is positive or negative impacts, and these impacts are identified and then taken into consideration. That is just to list the positive and negative impacts caused because of this project. And next step is the prediction of impacts. This helps to identify the magnitude of the change, that is the impact in the environment, when the project is implemented and also when the project is not carried out. And next is evaluation and assessment of significance. So if there are a very important significant or if there are a significant number of impacts, this step helps to focus on the key or the main adverse impacts. Then coming to one of the important steps, that is mitigation. This involves the introduction of measures in order to avoid or reduce or compensate any significant adverse impacts. Then comes the most important step, public consultation and participation. This step helps to ensure that the public's views are taken into consideration in the decision-making process. Now moving on to the next step, that is EIS presentation. Again another important step in this process. So EIS is environmental impact statement. So this environmental impact statement is a document which is produced as a result of EIA process. Okay, so presenting this EIS is really very important. Now coming to a review. So reviewing a project is nothing but the assessment of the quality of the EIS so that the decision making process will be more easier. Next is decision making. So at this stage, decisions are made by the relevant authority of the EIS. So here they will be deciding whether to accept or reject or postpone the project. Okay. Now post decision monitoring. After the project is approved, monitoring is done in order to record the outcomes associated with development impacts. And the final step is auditing. So after recording the outcomes, that is the actual outcomes in the previous step, that is the post decision monitoring. It is compared with the predicted outcomes in order to assess the changes caused in the process. Okay, so these are all the steps or the elements involved in EIA.